What if the reason your back hurts isn't age at all? 1 minute a day might be all it takes to decompress a lifetime of gravity. Watch the full story, only on The Art of Aging.
Healthy aging after 60 doesn't always come from a pill bottle. Sometimes it comes from a steel bar in a garage nobody uses anymore. Today, I'm going to tell you about the 60 seconds that gave a man back 3 inches of himself, and something he'd stopped believing he still had. There's a man I know, I'll call him Walter, who spent 40 years bent over a factory line, and then 30 more years bent over a garden. 2 different kinds of work, 2 different decades, but the same posture. Head down, shoulders forward. The particular curve of a man who has spent his whole life reaching towards something in front of him instead of standing tall inside himself. By the time he turned 73, he didn't stand up straight anymore. He stood up less crooked. That was the phrase his daughter used, gently. The way you talk about something you love that's slowly disappearing. Walter used to be 6'1". He remembered it clearly. The door frame in his childhood home where his father marked his height every birthday. The pride of finally passing the mark at 17. At his last checkup, the nurse measured him at 5'9". 2 inches, simply gone. Nobody had stolen them. Nobody could point to the day they left. Gravity had taken them, quietly, 1 vertebra at a time, for 73 years, with nothing ever pulling in the other direction. He didn't talk about it much. Men of Walter's generation rarely narrate their own decline out loud. They just adjust. A softer chair, a higher toilet seat, a walking stick left by the door just in case, which slowly stopped being just in case. His daughter noticed it more than he did. She noticed how long it took him to unfold himself out of the car now. How he'd brace one hand against the counter before straightening up from the sink. How, at family dinners, he'd started sitting slightly apart from the table because leaning forward to reach his plate had become its own small negotiation with his spine. Then his grandson, 17 and restless with summer, decided the garage needed a pull-up bar. It was a cheap thing, $12, a metal bar that wedged into the door frame with 2 turns of a screw. Bought with pull-ups in mind, teenage shoulders in mind. Nothing to do with a 73-year-old back. It hung there for 2 weeks, mostly ignored. A strange metallic addition to a garage full of rakes and paint cans and a workbench nobody used anymore either. One evening in late July, Walter was in the garage looking for a screwdriver. Tired in that specific end-of-day way where the whole spine seems to side downward. He looked up at the bar. He wasn't thinking about exercise. He wasn't thinking about his height. He was thinking, almost idly, about what it might feel like to just hang there for a second. The way you might reach for a door frame to stretch after a long car ride. Except this door frame had a bar built into it. He reached up, wrapped both hands around the steel, and let his feet leave the floor. He said later that the first few seconds were almost frightening. That unfamiliar sensation of his own body weight pulling straight down through his arms, through his shoulders. through a spine that hadn't been asked to lengthen in longer than he could remember. And then, somewhere around the 5th or 6th second, something shifted. He said it felt like his whole back exhaled. Not relief from pain, exactly. Walter wasn't in constant pain, just constant tightness. The low hum of a body that had compressed a little more every year without anyone noticing. This was different. This was space. A stretch reaching all the way from his neck down through his lower back. Places he didn't know still had room to move. He hung there for maybe 8 seconds before his grip gave out and his feet found the floor again. He stood there afterward, hands still on the bar, breathing a little harder than 8 seconds should have required. Then, he did it again.
Here's the honest mechanism behind what Walter felt. No mysticism required. Between every 2 vertebrae in your spine sits a disc, a shock absorber, mostly water, cushioning the bones above and below it. All day, every day, that disc is under load. Sitting compresses it, standing compresses it. Walking, lifting groceries, simply existing under gravity. All of it presses down on those discs, squeezing tiny amounts of fluid out with every hour upright. This is actually measurable. Most people are a few millimeters shorter by evening than they were when they woke up, because the discs have been slowly flattened by a full day of load.
Overnight, lying down, much of that height returns. The discs rehydrate, the spine decompresses on its own while you sleep. That's the body's natural reset button. But here's the problem with getting older. That reset becomes less complete. Disc tissue loses some of its water-holding capacity over the decades. The muscles and ligaments around the spine, especially in people who spend years in forward-bent postures, factory work, gardening, computer work, simply the accumulated posture of a long life, start holding the spine in that compressed, curved position, even when you're not actively loading it. The nightly reset stops fully resetting. And so, year after year, the compression very slowly wins. This is a meaningful piece of why older adults appear to shrink, why the low back tightens, why standing up straight starts to feel like an effort rather than a default. Hanging from a bar does something almost nothing else in daily life does. It applies gentle, sustained traction, actively pulling the vertebrae apart instead of pressing them together. Body weight, instead of loading the spine, becomes the very thing lengthening it. The discs get a rare moment to draw fluid back in. The muscles that have spent decades clenched around a compressed spine, particularly through the lower back and the muscles around the shoulder blades, get a chance to lengthen and release, sometimes audibly, in small pops and cracks that are simply pressure equalizing, not damage occurring. It's not a miracle cure, and it's not instant. A single hang won't undo 73 years, but repeated, gentle, regular decompression is one of the simplest, cheapest, most physiologically honest ways available to counter a force, gravity, that never once takes a day off. You don't need a gym membership or expensive equipment for this. A doorway pull-up bar costs less than a single dinner out, and most install in minutes without tools, wedged by tension into a standard door frame. But the entry point matters enormously, especially for someone Walter's age. Many older adults should not attempt a full dead hang on day one. Start smaller. If a full hang feels like too much for your shoulders or grip, begin instead by holding onto a sturdy countertop or banister at about chest height, leaning your weight backward to create gentle traction through the spine while your feet stay solidly on the floor. This is decompression without the full body weight demand.
If a doorway bar is accessible and your doctor has cleared you for it, start with just 5 to 10 seconds of a supported hang, feet barely lifted, even just an inch off the ground, rather than jumping straight to a full dead hang. Breathe slowly through it. Let your shoulders relax downward rather than shrugging up toward your ears, which is the instinct, but works against the traction you're trying to create. Over several weeks, as grip strength and shoulder comfort allow, you can gradually build toward longer holds. The 60 seconds Walter eventually reached took him nearly 2 months of small, consistent increases, not a single dramatic effort. Some mornings, some evenings, whenever the back feels loudest is often the best time to try it. The rule always is gentleness over heroics. This is meant to feel like relief, not like a workout you're pushing through. If you feel sharp pain, numbness, or tingling in your hands or arms, stop and check in with your doctor. Those are signs this particular approach may not be right for your specific spine.
But here is what actually moved me about Walter's story. And it wasn't the extra height he eventually got back, though there was some. A little over half an inch by his next checkup, enough that his daughter noticed before he mentioned it. It was something he said to her one evening, almost in passing, while she was helping him put away tools in the garage. He said, "For 60 seconds, nothing is pressing down on me." She thought at first he meant his back. He didn't correct her. But later, when she asked what he meant exactly, he was quiet for a moment. And then he said that at 73, there's a lot that presses down on a person. The years he spent bent over machines that didn't care about his back. The garden he kept for his late wife long after his knees told him to stop, because stopping felt like one more small betrayal of her memory. The quiet worry he carried about becoming a burden to his children. A worry he never said out loud, because saying it out loud would have made it real. The grief that never fully leaves. It just learns to sit lower in the chest, pressing down in its own quiet, permanent way. He told his daughter that for those 60 seconds hanging from a bar in his garage, none of that had weight. His body was simply hanging there, held by his own 2 hands, gravity pulling him longer instead of shorter. And for once, nothing was asking anything of him. Not his job, long since retired from, but still living in his shoulders. Not his garden, not his grief, not even his own expectations of himself. Just 60 seconds of being held, weightless, by nothing more complicated than his own grip, and a $12 bar his grandson bought, for reasons that had nothing to do with any of this.
Aging asks so much of the body, and it so rarely offers anything back in return. No rest, no reset, no moment where the accumulated weight of a long life simply briefly, lifts. Walter built himself one anyway, in a garage doorway, with a bar meant for someone half his age. He didn't set out to find a moment of relief from 73 years of carrying things. He just reached up one tired evening and found it was there the whole time, waiting for him to ask his body a question it still knew how to answer.
A pull-up bar. 60 seconds, built up slowly over weeks, not days. Feet off the floor, spine finally allowed to lengthen instead of compress. Muscles that have clenched for decades finally given permission to let go. It won't undo 73 years in a week, and it isn't right for every body or every spine. But for Walter, and for many people like him, it offers something genuinely rare in later life. A small, daily, physical decompression. And if you let it, a personal one too.
This is one man's story and general information, not medical advice. Hanging exercises aren't right for everyone, especially for people with shoulder injuries, osteoporosis, herniated discs, or other spinal conditions. Please talk with your doctor before starting, and stop immediately if you feel sharp pain, numbness, or tingling. If someone in your life has been carrying more than their spine should, send them this one, and follow @Art of Aging Podcast for the next story.